The shadow of the hegemony. For 15 centuries, the Centauri hegemony ruled the galactic core with absolute authority. Their crystalline vessels, powered by quantum singularities and piloted by beings who had long since transcended physical form, swept across the stars like an unstoppable tide. They were not conquerors in the traditional sense. They were collectors, catalogers of civilizations. Each species they encountered faced the same choice: submit to assessment and classification or face extinction. Those deemed harmonious were permitted to exist under Centauri guidance, their cultures and technologies carefully monitored and controlled. Those labeled discordant simply vanished, their worlds stripped of all life and repurposed for hegemony use. No resistance had ever succeeded. No rebellion had ever lasted more than a single planetary rotation. Until humanity. Earth and its colonies occupied an unremarkable corner of the Orion Arm, 17 light-years from the nearest Centauri outpost. For centuries, humans expanded cautiously, their radio emissions carefully dampened, their settlements hidden in asteroid belts or beneath the surfaces of moons. They were insignificant, primitive by hegemony standards, and thus beneath notice. Commander Ilara Voss stood on the observation deck of the TNS Phoenix, Earth's first and only stealth battleship. Through the view screen, she watched the remnants of New Eden burn. "Any survivors?" she asked, her voice steady despite the horror unfolding before her. Lieutenant Taro shook his head. "None detected, Commander. The colony's defensive grid didn't even slow them down. 3 million people, gone in minutes." Ilara's fingers tightened around the railing. New Eden had been humanity's largest off-world colony, a thriving world that represented the future of their species. Now it was just another smoking example of Centauri efficiency. "They didn't just kill them," Science Officer Renner said, looking up from her console. "They're harvesting. The Centauri ships are extracting something from the ruins." "Data," Ilara replied grimly. "They always take data before they take lives. How long until they track the colony's communications back to Earth?" 3 weeks. "Maybe less," Taro answered. Ilara turned from the view screen. "Then we have 3 weeks to prepare. Plot a course home. Maximum stealth. We need to warn Earth before the hegemony arrives." The Phoenix slipped away from the devastation, its quantum-dampening hull rendering it invisible to Centauri sensors. It was humanity's most advanced vessel, yet against the might of the hegemony, it was little more than a scout ship, fast and hidden, but woefully outgunned. As the Phoenix traveled, Ilara reviewed everything they knew about the Centauri, which wasn't much. The aliens communicated primarily through crystalline data transfers that human technology couldn't decipher. Their ships appeared to merge biological and technological elements in ways that defied conventional understanding. And their weapons, beams of coherent energy that seemed to ignore traditional shielding, had carved through New Eden's defenses as if they weren't there. "We can't fight them conventionally," Ilara told her senior staff during a strategy session. "We need something they've never seen before." "The Prometheus Protocol," Renner suggested hesitantly. The room fell silent. The Prometheus Protocol wasn't just classified. It was theoretical, dangerous, and possibly unethical. "It's never been tested on this scale," Chief Engineer Dawson objected. "We don't know if it will work, or what the side effects might be." "We don't have a choice," Ilara replied. "Earth has 3 weeks to live. We need a miracle." When the Phoenix reached Earth, the planet was already preparing for war. The loss of New Eden had galvanized humanity like nothing else could. Old political rivalries were set aside. Every industrial facility had been converted to military production. And deep beneath the Mariana Trench, in a facility known only as Deep Forge, scientists worked frantically to weaponize the most radical discovery in human history. Fleet Admiral Chen met Ilara at Deep Forge, his weathered face grave. "Your report on the Centauri attack has been distributed to all command centers," he said. "We're evacuating civilians to the deep bunkers. But there's nowhere to run. Not really." This is our last stand. What about the Prometheus Protocol? Ilara asked. Chen led her through layers of security to the heart of the facility. There, suspended in a massive containment field, was what looked like a small black hole, except it wasn't black. It shimmered with impossible colors, colors that hurt to look at directly. We've managed to stabilize it, Chen explained. Dr. Kasim calls it a consciousness interface. Theoretically, it allows direct neural linkage between a human mind and the fabric of space-time itself. Practically, we've built 6 prototype battleships designed to harness this technology. The Phoenix will be retrofitted as the 7th. 7 ships against the hegemony. Ilara couldn't keep the disbelief from her voice. 7 ships with pilots who can perceive and manipulate 11-dimensional space, Chen replied. If it works, you'll be able to see the Centauri ships in ways they can't imagine, predict their movements before they make them, and strike where they're vulnerable. And if it doesn't work? Chen's expression was grim. Then humanity joins the list of extinct species, and no one will remember we existed. The retrofitting of the Phoenix took 12 days. The Prometheus device, a smaller version of the containment field Ilara had seen, was installed directly behind the command chair. The ship's weapon systems were upgraded with experimental phase shift technology designed to penetrate Centauri defenses. The crew was reduced to essential personnel only, with sophisticated automation systems handling the rest. On the 13th day, long-range sensors detected a Centauri patrol fleet entering the outer Sol system. 3 crystalline vessels, each the size of an aircraft carrier, moving with the perfect coordination that made the hegemony so terrifying. They're early, Chen said during the final briefing. This is just their vanguard, testing our defenses. The main fleet will follow once they've assessed our capabilities. Then let's give them something to think about, Ilara replied. Phoenix is ready. So are we. The 7 prototype ships deployed in formation near the orbit of Mars, their black hulls absorbing light, their presence barely registering on sensors. Each captain had undergone intensive neural training, preparing their minds for connection to the Prometheus device. None of them knew exactly what to expect. Ilara sat in her command chair, neural interfaces attaching to the base of her skull. Around her, her reduced crew monitored systems in tense silence. Centauri patrol fleet approaching engagement range, Taro reported. They're scanning the system with some kind of quantum pulse technology. Have they detected us? Ilara asked. Negative. Our quantum dampening is holding. Good. All ships, maintain position. Wait for my signal. Ilara took a deep breath. Activate Prometheus. The world changed. Ilara's consciousness expanded outward, beyond the confines of her body, beyond the hull of the Phoenix. She could see the fabric of space itself, the undulating waves of probability, the quantum foam that bubbled beneath the surface of reality. And she could see the Centauri ships. They weren't just vessels. They were living consciousness, crystalline minds paired with technological bodies, moving through space with arrogant certainty. But from Ilara's new perspective, they were also terribly vulnerable. Their movements were predictable. Their defenses had gaps. Their weapons generated distortions in space-time before they fired. I can see them, Ilara whispered, though her voice carried to all 7 ships through the strange connection they now shared. I can see everything. The human fleet moved as one, not with the mechanical precision of the Centauri, but with the fluid grace of dancers anticipating each other's movements. They struck from angles that Centauri couldn't perceive, their phase-shift weapons bypassing alien defenses. The first Centauri vessel shattered like glass, its crystalline structure unable to maintain coherence against weapons it couldn't comprehend. The second tried to retreat, its engines generating a ripple in space-time that Ilara perceived seconds before it happened. The Phoenix was already there, waiting at the exact coordinates where the Centauri ship attempted to jump, its weapons primed. The third vessel managed to transmit a warning before it too was reduced to drifting fragments. But it was enough. The hegemony now knew that humanity wasn't just another primitive species waiting to be assessed and catalogued. They had encountered something new, something that could fight back. As the Phoenix and its sister ships regrouped, Ilara disengaged from the Prometheus device, her mind still reeling from the experience. "We won," Taro said in disbelief, staring at the tactical display. "We actually won." "This was just a patrol," Ilara reminded him, though she couldn't keep the hope from her voice. "The real test is still coming. But now we know the Prometheus works. We know we can fight them." Admiral Chen's face appeared on the main screen, his expression a mixture of triumph and concern. "Well done, Phoenix. All ships, return to Earth for debriefing and analysis. We've bloodied their nose, but the hegemony won't take this lightly." As the Phoenix turned homeward, Ilara gazed out at the stars. For the first time in 15 centuries, the Centauri hegemony had tasted defeat. But the real battle was just beginning. Somewhere out there, the main hegemony fleet was already being assembled, led by commanders who had overseen the extinction of entire civilizations. "Let them come," Ilara whispered to herself. "We'll be ready." The reckoning. In the crystalline chambers of the Grand Nexus, the ruling council of the Centauri hegemony convened in rare disarray. For beings that had long since transcended emotion, their agitation manifested as unstable harmonic patterns rippling through their collective consciousness. 3 patrol vessels, minor losses in material terms, but unprecedented in symbolic weight. No species had destroyed hegemony ships in over 700 years. The last to try, the silicon-based Moravians, had been systematically eradicated, their homeworld fractured into asteroid belts that now served as navigation markers. These humans must be classified as maximum discordance, pulsed first harmony, the eldest of the council. Their technology defies cataloging. They perceive dimensions they should not be able to access. They are an aberration, agreed second harmony, a dangerous mutation that could spread if not contained. The decision was unanimous. The human infection would be excised with the hegemony's full might. Admiral Korvax, veteran of 1,000 extinctions, would lead the cleansing fleet. Korvax's armada assembled at the edge of the Sol system 2 weeks later. 87 vessels ranging from sleek interceptors to massive world killers, each a perfect fusion of crystalline intelligence and reality-warping technology. At their center, Korvax's flagship, the Inexorable, pulsed with power drawn directly from a captive neutron star. "The humans have demonstrated unusual capabilities," Korvax communicated to his commanders. "But they are still primitive, still bound by the limitations of organic existence. We will not underestimate them again, but neither will we fear them." The hegemony endures. The hegemony classifies. The hegemony decides. On Earth, preparations continued with desperate intensity. The success against the patrol fleet had provided valuable data, allowing engineers to refine the Prometheus technology. 23 more ships had been retrofitted, bringing humanity's fleet to 30 vessels. It was still a pitiful force compared to what was coming, but each ship now carried weapons and defenses informed by their first encounter with the enemy. In a secured conference room beneath the rebuilt United Nations headquarters in Geneva, Ilara Voss listened as Admiral Chen outlined their defensive strategy. "We can't match them ship for ship," Chen explained, gesturing to the holographic display of the Sol system. "So we won't try. Instead, we'll use guerrilla tactics, hit-and-run strikes designed to disrupt their formation and separate their vessels." "They'll be expecting that," Ilara pointed out. "The Centauri have been fighting wars for longer than our species has existed." "Yes, but they've never fought us," responded Dr. Kasim, the theoretical physicist responsible for the Prometheus breakthrough. "Our advantage is that the Prometheus device doesn't just let us see higher dimensions. It lets us manipulate them in ways that Centauri can't predict." "What are you suggesting?" Chen asked. Kasim's dark eyes gleamed with the manic energy of someone operating on too little sleep and too much caffeine. "I'm suggesting, Admiral, that instead of plain defense, we take the fight to them." The Phoenix, with its enhanced stealth capabilities, could penetrate deep into their formation and deploy a modified Prometheus device directly within their fleet. A bomb? Ilara asked. Not exactly, Kasim replied. More like a localized distortion in 11-dimensional space. It would disrupt their ability to coordinate and possibly even sever their connection to their higher consciousness networks. Chen frowned. You're talking about giving them the equivalent of a collective lobotomy. I'm talking about survival, Kasim countered. Either we take drastic action, or humanity ends here. After hours of debate, the plan was approved. The Phoenix would lead a small strike team of 5 ships to infiltrate the hegemony fleet, while the remaining human vessels engaged in diversionary attacks from multiple vectors. If successful, the Prometheus disruptor would create enough chaos for Earth's fleet to press their advantage. As Ilara prepared to board the Phoenix, she found Lieutenant Taro waiting at the airlock. The crew is ready, Commander, he reported. But I should tell you, everyone on board has accessed the mission parameters. They know the odds. And no one requested a transfer. We're all with you. Ilara nodded, a lump forming in her throat. Tell them I couldn't ask for a better crew. The Centauri Armada entered the inner Sol system 3 days later, their formation a perfect geometric pattern that human mathematicians would have found beautiful if it wasn't designed for their extinction. They bypassed the outer planets without engagement, their focus fixed on Earth. Admiral Chen deployed the main human fleet in a scattered defense around the orbital paths of Mars and Venus, each vessel using the Prometheus technology to partially phase out of normal space, appearing as ghostly echoes on Centauri sensors. Distraction force is in position. Chen's voice came through the Phoenix's comm system. You have your window, Commander Voss. Make it count. The Phoenix and its 4 companion ships activated their enhanced stealth systems and accelerated toward the heart of the hegemony fleet. The Prometheus connection linked the 5 captains in a shared consciousness, allowing them to coordinate without conventional communication. Through this link, Ilara could feel the cold, alien presence of the Centauri vessels, each one a crystalline mind of vast complexity, yet fundamentally different from human thought. Where human consciousness was chaotic, emotional, and adaptive, the Centauri were structured, hierarchical, and fixed. Their very perfection was, perhaps, their weakness. They can't see us, Ilara realized with a start. Not truly. They perceive reality through such rigid patterns that anything operating outside those patterns becomes invisible. The Phoenix slipped between 2 massive Centauri dreadnoughts, so close that conventional sensors would have detected their engine heat, yet the alien vessels showed no reaction. Around them, space itself seemed to bend and warp as the hegemony ships prepared to unleash their devastating weapons on the scattered human fleet. We're approaching optimal deployment position, reported Renner from her science station. The Inexorable is directly ahead, their command vessel. Ilara felt a chill. The Inexorable pulsed with a power that dwarfed anything she had ever encountered, its crystalline structure housing a consciousness so vast and ancient that it barely registered humans as sentient. Change of plans, she decided suddenly. We're not deploying the disruptor near the fleet. We're taking it directly into the Inexorable. Commander, Taro's voice held equal parts alarm and respect. That's a suicide run. No, it's precision. Dr. Kasim said the disruptor needs to be at the heart of their command structure to be most effective. That's the Inexorable. Ilara turned to face her bridge crew. I'm not ordering anyone to follow. The Phoenix will do this alone if necessary. Through the Prometheus link, she felt rather than heard the response from the other 4 captains. They were with her, all the way. As the human diversionary fleet engaged the outer elements of the hegemony armada, the Phoenix and its companions accelerated toward the Inexorable, their engines pushed beyond safe limits. At the last possible moment, they would separate, with the Phoenix continuing toward the target while the others provided close-range disruption. Admiral Korvax, connected to the vast sensory network of the hegemony fleet, detected an anomaly, a fluctuation in the quantum field surrounding the inexorable. Not a human ship, surely. Their sensors would have detected any approach. Yet something was there, operating on the edges of perception. Intensify scans on Sector 7, he commanded. Deploy phase crystals. The order came too late. The Phoenix dropped fully into normal space mere kilometers from the Inexorable's command node, suddenly visible to the startled Centauri sensors. Before they could respond, Ilara activated the Prometheus disruptor and transmitted a final message to Earth. Phoenix to Fleet Command. Deploying package. Whatever happens next, remember, they aren't gods. They're just old. The disruptor activated, not with an explosion, but with a silent ripple that spread outward through 11-dimensional space. To normal perception, nothing seemed to happen. But to the Prometheus-enhanced minds of the human fleet, the effect was immediate and dramatic. The crystalline consciousness of the Centauri fleet fragmented. Where before there had been perfect coordination, now there was discord. Where there had been certainty, now there was confusion. The rigid patterns that had defined Centauri existence for millennia suddenly became fluid, chaotic, human. In the command center on Earth, Admiral Chen watched in astonishment as the perfect formation of the hegemony fleet dissolved into disarray. All ships press the attack, he ordered. Concentrate fire on vessels showing the most disruption. The human fleet surged forward, each captain using their Prometheus connection to identify and target the most vulnerable Centauri ships. Some of the alien vessels attempted to retreat, their movements erratic. Others turned against their own kind, firing weapons in seeming panic. At the heart of the chaos, the Inexorable shuddered as conflicting commands ripped through its crystalline networks. Admiral Korvax, his consciousness directly linked to the ship's systems, experienced something no Centauri had felt in thousands of years. Doubt. The Phoenix, its mission complete, attempted to withdraw from the Inexorable's immediate vicinity, but the damage to its engines was too severe. As the massive Centauri flagship began to break apart, gravity waves pulled the Phoenix inexorably inward. All hands, emergency evacuation, Ilara ordered, even as she remained connected to the Prometheus device. Through it, she could feel the death throes of the ancient consciousness that had been Admiral Korvax, could sense his final realization. The hegemony had catalogued countless species, but had never truly understood any of them. Escape pods launched from the Phoenix, carrying most of its crew to safety. But Ilara remained on the bridge with a skeleton crew who had refused to leave. Someone needed to ensure the disruptor continued functioning until the Inexorable was completely neutralized. As the Centauri flagship collapsed in on itself, the resulting gravitational distortion created a temporary wormhole, a phenomenon that shouldn't have been possible according to conventional physics, but one that Ilara, through her Prometheus-enhanced perception, had anticipated. Helm, set course for the anomaly, she ordered. Full power. Commander, we don't know where it leads, Taro objected. Ilara smiled grimly. It leads away from here. That's enough for now. The Phoenix plunged into the wormhole just as the Inexorable's containment fields failed completely. Behind them, the resulting quantum cascade rippled through the hegemony fleet, disabling or destroying dozens more vessels. In the aftermath, as the surviving human ships regrouped and began the process of securing the Sol system, Admiral Chen stood before the United Nations Security Council with a bittersweet report. The Centauri fleet has been defeated. At least 30 of their vessels have been destroyed, and the remainder have retreated beyond our sensor range. Earth is safe for now. He paused, his expression solemn. However, the Phoenix and Commander Voss are presumed lost. The wormhole they entered collapsed immediately after their passage. We don't know if they survived, or where they might have emerged. And the hegemony itself? Asked the Secretary General. Still out there, Chen replied, but fundamentally changed. Our analysis of captured Centauri data suggests that what happened here has reverberated throughout their empire. The rigid hierarchy that defined their civilization for millennia has been disrupted. Some of their worlds are already in open rebellion. So we've won? Someone asked. Chen shook his head. No, but we've survived. And we've proven that the Centauri can be defeated. That's a message that will spread across the galaxy faster than any fleet. As the politicians debated humanity's next steps, Chen stood at a viewport, gazing up at the stars. Somewhere out there, perhaps, the Phoenix and its brave crew still existed. And beyond that, countless civilizations living under Centauri dominion were about to learn that resistance wasn't futile after all. The age of the hegemony was ending. What would replace it remained to be seen. But humanity, against all odds, would have a voice in shaping that future. And if the Centauri or anyone else made the mistake of underestimating humans again, they would face more than just one experimental battleship. They would face a species that had stared extinction in the face and refused to blink. A species that remembered.